Good evening. How are you?
Good evening.
Okay. Okay, we're set here. So chapter 7. And we're going to come back into a teaching aspect, and then we're going to come to 2 miracles, just like we did in the previous chapter. So we had kind of a teaching, or the interlude, and then we had some miracles. So the same thing is going on. We just kind of repeat the pattern. So, chapter 7. Now when the Pharisees with some scribes who had come from Jerusalem gathered around him, they observed that some of his disciples ate their meals with unclean, that is, unwashed hands. For the Pharisees, in fact all Jews, do not eat without carefully washing their hands, keeping the tradition of their elders. And then coming from the marketplace, they do not eat without purifying themselves. And there are many other things they have traditionally observed, the purification of cups, jugs, skettles, beds. So the Pharisees and scribes questioned him. So, one is they're coming up from Jerusalem, which is going to give us a hint that if they come up there to question him, when he comes down there, they're going to question him some more, of course. So they questioned him. Why do your disciples not follow the tradition of the elders, but instead eat a meal with unclean hands? So, that happened to me. I'm going to do this again. It's going to do it again. So it did this to me the other night too. Bam! I don't know what that is.
Automatic erasure.
So yeah, something's happening. I just do it with another page. Thankfully, none of you want these notes, right? So I don't have to worry about them being neat. So Jerusalem. So they're coming up from Jerusalem. So why do your disciples not fulfill the command? So it sounds like a basic question, but of course they're not attacking him. They're kind of just setting up a distinction between the disciples and what other disciples do and what his disciples do. And of course this is the tradition of the elders. And if it's the tradition of the elders, it should be respected. So then Jesus responds, well did Isaiah prophesy about you hypocrites, as it is written, this people honors me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines human precepts. You disregard God's commandment, but cling to human tradition. There was a phrase for that. Is hold fast to human tradition. So you hold fast to human tradition. He went on to say how well if you set aside the commandment of God in order to uphold your tradition. So now it's not human tradition, it's your tradition. So it starts, the battle lines are drawn. We have what's going on here. So for Moses said, honor your father and mother, and whoever curses father and mother shall die. Yet you say if a person says to father and mother, any support you might have from me is korban. So you notice how he goes into an Aramaic or Hebrew word. And as I mentioned, that's one of the things Mark does on a regular basis is he throws in these Hebrew words, meaning dedicated to God. More specifically, near to God. So it's drawn near to God. Which of course refers to the person giving themselves over to God as opposed to a thing coming to God. That's the korban, drawn near to God, or dedicated to God, is how it's mentioned here. If you allow him to do nothing more for his father and mother, you nullify the word of God in favor of your tradition that you have handed on. So how is Jesus coming up with that? You nullify the word of God? So he specifically mentions there's the commandments going on here. So the commandment talks about honoring your father and mother. And of course elsewhere it talks about the one who dishonors father and mother will die. And Proverbs talks very strongly about that, as well as we find it in Leviticus. So that's the word of God. We know that should be the word of God, at least as it's set forth. And of course they're putting up other traditions in favor of that, so rather than this. But you notice he's completely changed the topic. Okay? He's not addressing the fasting issue right now. He's completely shifted it over. So in order to make his attack, because he probably doesn't have a defense. for the hand washing thing, in terms of the tradition. So he doesn't have a defense for that, but he does have an attack for this, which is you have to put God's word above all things. That's going to come back to, you know, he's going to use that again in a minute, but that's how he moves the argument forward, because he doesn't really have a response to that. Okay, you allow him to do nothing more for his father and mother. You nullify the word of God in favor of your tradition that you have handed on. And you do many such things. And, you know, we know that, and it happens, I think, in the Catholic Church as well, but if you've ever gone to parts of the city where there's a lot of Orthodox Jews, and you'll find that various ones wear different kinds of hats. And the hats have nothing to do with the scripture, because the scripture just says that a man's head should be covered. So it has nothing to do with the scripture itself. Each of the hats is based upon some teacher that they're following, usually from the 17th or 18th or even sometimes the 16th century. So the style of hat is not because it's in style, it's because that the teacher of God of this sect of Orthodoxy has determined that this is the hat, and they're going to continue wearing that hat 200 years later or 300 years later, because that's what you're supposed to have. That's the one hat you should have on your head. So nothing else. So I think we do that in some ways. So I can't think of an example right offhand, but it's that kind of thing. So there is this human tradition. We're going to keep doing this no matter what. Okay? Okay, so you nullify the word of God. He summoned the crowd again and said to them, "Hear me, all of you, and understand." So now the teaching is not coming to, it's not the discussion any longer between the Pharisees and Jesus. Now it's going to become a teaching to everyone. And this is where he comes back to them. Hear me, all of you, and understand. Which, of course, are the two aspects, right? So it's not just hear, but it's also understand, because that's the one thing disciples seem to have trouble with right now. They're not understanding very well. Hear me and understand. Nothing that enters one from the outside can defile the person, but the things that come out from within are what defile. And of course, so the whole teaching, the whole discussion is built upon the premise of washing your hands, but also washing the things that come from the marketplace, or washing your hands when you come from the marketplace. And that ritual purification or washing, the original word that's used in there is baptizo. And then they changed it because for the Christian community, we think of baptism and a very specific ritual, rite, and something that happens. But baptism simply means to immerse in water. And so John's baptism was not a new idea. It was what the Jewish people did to all kinds of things. They would baptize them. They would immerse them in water to purify them. So, of course, John would take people and immerse them in water to purify them. So that sense is there. But so they changed the word, and most of the manuscripts, most of the manuscripts have the word of purification as opposed to baptizing. And part of that is simply a change in the early church, almost immediately recognizing we don't want to confuse the two, because it means something very specific to us. And so they kind of move the word off to the side. Okay, so nothing that enters a person from the outside can defile, since it enters not the heart but the stomach and passes out into the latrine. So specifically, he's talking about the mouth, right? So passages. So and of course, anything that you got from the marketplace, you're going to put in your mouth and eat it. And of course, so he's saying it doesn't get into here. It doesn't get into here because it just gets into the stomach and then goes out into the latrine, and that's the end of it. And of course, there's no sense of food nourishing us or anything like that, because that would ruin the argument if you absorb the food. And in John's Gospel, we're very clear that we need to eat the body of Christ. We need to eat his flesh and drink his blood, so that we have life in us. So this is not an argument that Jesus would hold on to, but it's one that's good for the day. Okay? And of course, we've all been in that situation, right? We make an argument, we know the argument's really no good, it won't stand the test of time, but it's good enough to win what we're talking about now. So that's what we're going to use. Okay. Thus he declared all foods clean. And the way it's done in Greek is you notice here even it has the pronoun. The Mark writes it with a masculine pronoun, so the word is presumed to refer back to Jesus declaring all foods clean, not that all foods are clean, but it's by the act of Jesus making them clean. So in a sense, he's not just saying all foods are automatically clean, but in that moment, Mark is saying Jesus makes all foods clean. But what comes out of a person, so first he talks about what comes in a person, that can't affect you. But what comes out of a person, that is what defiles. From within people, from their hearts, come evil thoughts, unchastity, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, licentiousness, envy, blasphemy, arrogance, folly. All these evils come from within and they defile. So, let's go into that for a second because most of these, not all of these, but many of these, of course, if it's coming into the mouth, he's also talking things about coming out of the mouth, right? And so when he's talking about what comes out from within defiles, why does that happen? Why does that happen? So you speak lies, or you lust after things, or envious, and of course you talk about what you want, or you talk about people. Why is that important that that this is something that defiles from within?
Because it comes from the heart.
Yeah, but there's another thing in there. Basically, if there are words, that's your breath, right? Your breath forms the words. But we have the breath of God in us. And therefore, if our breath is not of God, then it is of evil. And of course, remember, because when we were created, God breathed life into Adam. And of course, now what are we breathing out? We're not breathing out the Spirit of God. We're breathing out some kind of evil, some kind of blasphemy, some kind of problem or lust or whatever. So the image goes back all the way back to the creation moment, and that there's a relationship between who we are and of course who God is. Because who's the main character of Mark's gospel? Not Jesus. He's the one who we see all the time, but he always is referring back to God. So he's trying to show us God. And in this is one of those times it's very easy to see that. Okay, so now we come up to two miracles. And this is, we talked about geography last time, so I think I've got it. So most of where Jesus is right around the Sea of Galilee. Most of the time he's right along the shore, and then of course he goes to Nazareth where he's not welcome, and that's a little off the shore. But now he's going to go up to Tyre and Sidon. So he's going way out of the way. So he's going beyond the Roman road of commerce and into other territories, into Phoenician territories. So from that place, Jesus went out to the district of Tyre. He entered a house and wanted no one to know about it, but he could not escape notice. So again, it's still going back to his fame, as he's too famous and people are going to know. And part of that is everybody wants, because the towns are small enough, stranger walks in, they all want to know who the stranger is. So it's not just that he's not noticed, but of course the gossip network starts right away. So who's staying at your house today? So people start to try and find out. That's the first thing on their mind. So he entered the house and wanted no one to know about it, but he could not escape notice. Soon a woman whose daughter had an unclean spirit heard about him. She came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek, a Syrophoenician by birth, and she begged him to drive the demon out of her daughter. So everything else that we've seen, he did the miracles over here in the territory of the Gerasenes, but most of the time, most of the miracles have been happening for the Jewish people. And now we're going to find two miracles that are very close to miracles that he had done for Jewish people. Now he's doing for Gentiles. So the woman was a Greek, Syrophoenician. She begged him to drive the demon out of her daughter. He said to her, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not right to take the food of the children and throw it to the dogs." So there's a couple of things there, right? So obviously he's setting up the dichotomy between the children of Israel and the Gentiles, who are not the children of Israel, who are not the chosen ones. So the children be fed first. But the other thing then he does, he insults her, right? So we don't want to throw the food to the dogs. And you know, other than amongst guys who are trying to egg each other on, and they'll say something like, dog you. Most of the time you call somebody a dog, that's an insult. So, and it's a terrible insult. It's one of the worst insults we have, actually, on a regular basis. So, and unfortunately, the word is getting used so much that people are becoming immune to the depravity of the insult. So there's a huge insult going on here. Not just the dichotomy of children and Gentiles, or Israelites and Gentiles, but then he goes one further. Now, to Jewish people, it's an insult, but they're just not us, you know. It's kind of like when you listen to trumpet, you got to take it to that point of view that, you know, there's a denseness there that just says, well, you know, it's us and then everybody else. And so because they're everybody else, they don't matter. Okay? And that's kind of what's happening here. There's us and then there's everybody else, and because you're part of everybody else, you don't matter. So there's that going on there too. So now we come up with a conversation that is much like a rabbinic conversation, where the rabbis start discussing and one gets the better of the other. So it's not right to take the food of the... And the food, the word that's translated food is actually... I'm sorry, I'm writing in Spanish now. Oh, I can do that. It's actually bread. So the word that is translated as food is not right to take the bread of the children and throw it to the dogs. Which, of course, bread refers back to a couple of things. First, in our mind, is it's going to be the bread of life. It's going to be the body of Christ. But also, bread is the Word of God. So remember that the Word of God goes forth and it feeds people. So it's not right to take the Word of God and just throw it away to people who are not going to believe or not understand it. So there's two levels of that. And it's unfortunate that the translation in English came up with the word food instead of bread. But that would be the more accurate translation to most of the Greek manuscripts. So that helps us understand the part of what's going on. But she responds, and of course, he says to her, let the children be fed first. She replied and said, now, the interesting thing here is she doesn't disagree with him. She doesn't disagree with him. So she's not going to accept the insult, and she's not going to disagree about the separation. And in a sense, and this is actually something that my very first pastor taught me when I was a deacon, is when somebody comes at you, they're really mad, first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you're on their side. Because if you're on their side, then both of you are mad at the same thing. But if you decide to take an opposing view, then of course they're going to be mad at you. And you don't want them mad at you, you want them mad at whatever thing is out there. So she does that, she jumps over to his side. She says, Lord, even the dogs under the table eat the children's scrap. So in effect she's saying, oh yes, you're right. But the dogs do eat the scraps that fall from the children. So she jumps back onto his side, and then of course, now he's got to figure out what to do with that. But it's not just a process of an argument, there's also an act of faith in that. Because in the act of faith, what she's basically is looking at that and saying, okay, there is a distinction here, but everyone needs that bread of life. Everyone needs that Word of God. And so even if it comes to us just as a scrap, it's worth having. So at that point, he accedes to her request, and he said to her, for saying this you may go. The demon has gone out of your daughter. When the woman went home, she found the child lying in bed, and the demon gone. So now this is the healing of the demons, or the expulsion of the demon. We've seen this happen a couple of times, right? So we saw it at the synagogue. There's the first miracle he performs in Mark's Gospel, and then we see it with the Gerasene. But he's completely away from this person. Even with Jairus, he's going over to Jairus', for Jairus' daughter, he's going over to Jairus' house. Okay, so, and everybody else has either touched him, or he said you're healed, or be freed of this. But now he's throwing miracles out at a distance, which is, again, another step in understanding his power, in kind of expanding it so we can see exactly who we're dealing with here. Yes?
Is he testing her?
You could say that. That's a reasonable interpretation.
Because it seemed like, doesn't sound like Jesus when he says, you're not Jewish, so why would I help you? That
Okay,
doesn't sound
but
like him.
let's go back a second. He'd just been confronted by the Pharisees from Jerusalem. And so basically, if he goes around saying, I'm going to help everyone, they're going to go after him again. So in a sense, this allows him to protect himself. He's being very clear. I am Jewish. My ministry is to Jewish people. So he could be testing her, and that would be the standard pious interpretation. And we've heard that for years. He could be setting up this dichotomy, but more likely he's protecting himself. He just had this confrontation, and in a sense he's showing to anybody who's listening that no, he is a good practicing Jew doing what's right. And he's not going to defile himself going into the home of someone who's not Jewish. Because that's how it looks. And so, in a sense, by saying that, he can go back and say, I held to Orthodox teaching. So he's protecting himself at the same time he's doing it. So yes, you can say he's testing her, and that would be a standard interpretation that has been valid for 2,000 years, and we have saints who have done that same interpretation. It's perfectly valid. But I think there's some other things going on when you look at the gospel, and one of them is he just had a confrontation where he's challenged for not being Jewish enough. You didn't tell your disciples to wash their hands. And so now he's going to go back and say, but I didn't go to her house. Okay, because that would be another charge against him. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so moving into the second healing. So again, he left the district of Tyre and went by way of Sidon to the Sea of Galilee. So he's going back to the Sea of Galilee, but if he's over here in Tyre, he goes up to Sidon and then comes back down. So he's taking the long way around. He's coming up and around. And again, there could be any number of things. Remember, one of the things I told you is Jesus often got in trouble, and particularly in Mark's Gospel. There's often confrontation scenes, and so he would move from one side to the other, and in a sense, be in an entirely different territory or country or under someone else's authority. So this could have a political ramification. He's just kind of going out of his way to get back to where he wants to be, in case there's people waiting for him. Because his fame is growing, but not everybody who knows of him likes him. So the growing fame also has produced some enemies, as we've seen. Okay, so he left the district of Tyre and went by way of Sidon to the Sea of Galilee into the district of the Decapolis. So he's not going back to his area of Capernaum or into his native territory around here. He's going into the area of the Decapolis down here. Okay, so the 10 cities is the Decapolis. And that's all that ancient assignation goes all the way back to the time of King David and King Saul. So the Philistines were meant to be the people of the Decapolis, of the 10 cities. So that's a very ancient designation. Into the district of the Decapolis, so again, it's a Gentile territory. And people brought to him a deaf man who had a speech impediment and begged him to lay his hand on him. So this again, we've got Mark adding details here. And so you've got a deaf man who has a speech impediment. Why?
Because they can't hear their own voice.
Exactly. It's a normal thing. Many,
lot of them
I don't know if
talk
most,
because
but
they
certainly
can't hear their
everybody
voice.
who's deaf, who starts off deaf and starts trying to speak, they're not going to sound correctly because they can't hear themselves. And so there is always a speech impediment as you start. Now, and of course, with our education system and all that, we've learned how to train people so that you don't notice the impediment. But For some people, that impediment is always there. So it's kind of natural, the two, but that whole thing, and the other thing of deaf mute, of course, you know, when you say a deaf mute back in those days, well, why would they learn how to talk? They've never heard the words. So how would they know the words? But so he's just adding details here. But a speech impediment begged him to lay his hand on him. Okay, so again, we know that Jesus' basic healing style is to lay his hand on someone. But this time now, this is the first time this happens, and it's going to happen again. Jesus doesn't cure him right then and there. He takes him away. So he took him off by himself away from the crowd. He put his finger into the man's ears and spitting, touched his tongue. So now it's not laying his hand on him, but now he's you know, putting his finger into his ear to kind of open them up and spitting to touch his tongue to kind of free the tongue. So there's a very physical and a lot more work to this miracle than there was before. And of course, those who don't have faith will immediately see that Jesus' powers are limited, or they're not as strong as they used to be, or something. You know, there's all kinds of people who will interpret that negatively. But I'm not sure that there's a negative interpretation here, other than the kind of, if you want to call it the intimate touch, the kind of like being part of the whole person. So it's not, you know, oh fine, you're healed, now go away. But there's a healing going on that requires connection, in a sense. So he put his hands, touched his tongue, then he looked up to heaven and groaned and said, Ephrathah, that is, be opened. Actually, it would be better translated as be released. Be released. And that, of course, is sickness, just like sin, has a hold on us, and we need to be free from it. So we need to be free from it. So Mark translates the Ephrathah as be open, because, of course, you want to open the ears and open the mouth so you can speak and hear clearly. But the actual phrase, it should be translated as be released of this sin. Okay. And immediately, see, and now then comes immediately the man's, and of course it's not immediately, what's that phrase? Straight way. Because when Jesus does that, he makes a straight way for the man to go to heaven. So straight way, or immediately, is how we translate it, but, and immediately the man's ears were opened, the speech impediment was removed, and he spoke plainly. So this be released, he's immediately released from that, and he can speak plainly. So he has a straight path now in order to live his life. Jesus ordered them not to tell anyone, but the more he ordered them not to, the more they proclaimed it. So again, we go back to this, and we're going to see the opposite of this in a minute. But again, we come back to this, and they get a miracle, they get something that they long for, and then they don't listen to the simplest thing, you know, like, okay, you've got the miracle, you know, just keep it quiet. Can't do that. Okay, so, and you would think, you know, it's the kind of thing, what is it, Naaman the Syrian, when he comes to Elisha to be healed, and he's, you know, he says, all I want you to do is dip yourself in the Jordan River 7 times. He said, our rivers are nicer than the Jordan. Why do they come down? And, you know, and the guy had told you to you know, give him a cart full of gold. You would have given him a cart full of gold, or you would have paid greatly for this miracle. And all he's asking for you to do is do this. So, you know, you'd think the guy would pay greatly for a miracle like that, and all he's asking for is just keep quiet, and he won't do that.
It's so hard.
Right. So, but again, they were exceedingly astonished, and the phrase, of course, is they're outside themselves. So when they're astounded, they're not in themselves, but they're just kind of beside themselves with disbelief of what's going on. He has done all things well. He makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. So again, that same kind of adulation that we saw in the earlier miracles. But now he's not in the Jewish territory, because the Jewish people, the last couple of miracles, they turned against him. So now in the Gentile territory, he's doing these miracles and now they're back in favor of him. So this group is in favor of him. Now we come back to the third miracle in this, and now this is the feeding of the 4,000, and so this miracle, some people think there's only one multiplication of loaves story. Mark has the two, and I would say the two are there. They're probably two different multiplications, because again, this is the miracle. Okay, this is the one that makes him different than the others, and also this story doesn't completely echo the other story. So if it was simply a repetition, then you'd think, well, it would echo more, but it doesn't. So in those days, when there again was a great crowd without anything to eat, he summoned the disciples and said, "My heart is moved with pity for the crowd." So unless he moved, which we don't have any sense that he moved, he's still in the Decapolis area. So the other miracle happened up over here, so this one happens down here, almost across the sea from where he was. And again, unless he moved, because it doesn't tell us that he moved, then this one is with Gentile people as opposed to Jewish people. In those days, so he fed the Jews, now he's feeding the Gentiles. And that whole line about it's not right to take the food of the children and give it to the dogs, that whole line has now been completely dismissed, because he's just performed, or this is the third one, he's going to perform 3 miracles to the people who are not the children of God, are not part of the Israelites. So in those days there was again a great crowd without anything to eat. He summoned the disciples and said, "My heart is moved with pity for the crowd, because they have been with me now for 3 days and have nothing to eat." So the first difference is the other crowd was all afternoon. He had gotten out of the boat, they were there, he felt pity on them, he started teaching them, and it was late in the day. So it was only 1 day, now it's 3 days. And how would a crowd be there for 3 days and not eat anything? Actually, there's some normalcy to that. When we go back and go into the history of St. Augustine, people would travel from 150, 200 miles to go hear St. Augustine. So, they travel on foot. I don't know, it's a week's walking to get there, maybe a week's walking to get back, so there's your 2-week vacation. Just going to hear St. Augustine preach. And so, people go to concerts, they'll go to Indiana or whatever, Wisconsin for a concert, but you're talking going 100 miles on foot to hear St. Augustine, who would preach for like 6 hours. So you think my sermons are long. I look at this, I'm really short in comparison to St. Augustine. Now, maybe not so short in comparison to other people, but that's so they would travel and they would listen to St. Augustine for a long time, and so that kind of thing. And of course, if they were traveling, they would bring food with them. But after 3 days, if they're still there listening to him, then they've probably run out of food. And certainly many foods would go bad after 3 days, but some foods you might still have. So they have nothing to eat. If I send them away hungry to their homes, they will collapse on the way, and some of them will have a great distance. So again, here the towns were right around it, but over here, there we go. If it's on this back area, the towns aren't quite as close, especially if it's more toward the Decapolis here. So the towns might be further away from where they are. They will collapse on the way, and some of them have come a great distance. His disciples answered him, "Where can anyone get enough bread to satisfy them in this deserted place?" So last time the disciples came up and said, you should send them away, and that way they can get something to eat. And now Jesus has already said, "I can't send them away, it's too far." So the disciples come back, not with that, but then where can anyone get so much food for them? And again, these are the same 12 disciples, the same apostles who were with him at the other miracle. So you would think they would know something, but again, one of Mark's standard images here is the disciples do not understand. So time after time, they're confronted with something that any one of us reading the gospel would say, well, of course they'll have something, and he'll make that happen. We're already ahead of the game. But the disciples, the characters in the story, they're completely dense to this. And part of that is, I think, remember to consider that Jesus is the Son of God, or is God, is such a foreign thought to Jewish people. There's only one God, you know, Yahweh, and so there's no one else. And so when the disciples go out preaching that Jesus is the Son of God, that would have taken a huge leap of faith, and more than just the resurrection. So there's story after story after story to help convince them. So this did not have this conviction did not happen simply with the resurrection. It had been built up over much time and over many experiences. Every time they would want to deny it because it's alien to their basic faith. You know, it would be like if someone says to us that Jesus isn't the Son of God, well, we would do everything in our power not to believe that. And so, of course, thinking that there's more than one person to God, they're going to do everything in their power not to believe that, no matter how much Jesus shows them that power. So, still he asked them, how many loaves do you have? So it always goes back to them. So, and again, that's kind of standard Christian teaching. You don't get it from somewhere else, you give it yourself. That's the standard Christian paradox. You give what you do not have, and watch what the Lord does with it. Okay? So, 7 they replied. So again, last time it was 5, and they had 5 and 2 fish, they were very clear. This time they have 7. So again, differences are there's not extreme yet, but they're all over the place. So the story is being told in a sense in a different way entirely. They replied, he ordered the crowd to sit down on the ground. And again, last time you have them sitting down in groups of 50 and 100. Mark puts in the details and organizes the whole thing. That's not here. Has them sit down on the ground. And then taking the 7 loaves, he gave thanks, broke them, and gave them to the disciples to distribute. Then they distributed them to the crowd. So you've got the bread going out there. And it's very clear. They also had a few fish. Now, so the fish is kind of an afterthought. I don't know if they were hiding them in the boat, so they didn't have to give them away, or whatever was going on. But it looks like an afterthought to that. Which again, they were integral to the first multiplication story. It was 5 loaves and 2 fish. It was very clear. All of that was to be blessed. All of that was to be broken. This is almost, okay, we've taken care of this. Oh, and there's some fish over here too. So it's like an afterthought to that. So it's not integral to the story, but kind of additional to the story. And then, and sent a blessing over them in order for them to distribute it also. They ate and were satisfied. They picked up the fragments left over, 7 baskets. And again, there's no connection between the 5 fish and the 12 baskets. But there isn't, you want to say there is a connection between 7 loaves and 7 baskets, that's fine. But, so the story's different again, because there was no connection there before. So if you look at that and say, oh, see how there's 7 loaves and now there's 7 baskets of it, that's perfectly fine, but it's still a different story. It's still a different miracle. There were about 4,000 people. And again, so, and if you're going to tell a new miracle story, or you're going to repeat the miracle story, or you're going to kind of, we've already seen Jesus' power increase, right? Because now he's casting out demons that are a mile away. So we've seen his power increase and the kind of the width of it expand out. So you would think if Mark is simply following a formula in terms of writing this gospel up and trying to show us, well, his power is increasing, then it shouldn't be 4,000, it should be more like 7,000 people or 10,000 people. In other words, there should have been an increase in the crowd, simply because that would have made the miracle more powerful. But there wasn't a desire to do that. It's actually a decrease in the numbers. So again, those who think it's just simply a repetition, there's not a lot for them to stand on, other than it's, he multiplies loaves twice. But he heals more than one blind person, and he casts out more than one demon. So, hey, why can't he multiply loaves more than once? He dismissed them and got into the boat with his disciples and came to the region of Dalmanutha. So, I couldn't find Dalmanutha on the map. I don't know. Do you have a place for it?
My footnote says it was Magdala.
Magdala.
Yeah.
So that's further north there. And then,
There.
yeah, up here. Up by the sea. Okay. So he came to the region of Magdala or Dalmanutha. So now he's back into Jewish territory. So he crosses over and now he's back into Jewish territory. He's over here. Right? Yeah. Okay. So the Pharisees came forward and began to argue with him, seeking from him a sign from heaven to test him. He sighed from the depth of his spirit and said, "Why does this generation seek a sign? Amen, I say to you, no sign will be given to this generation." Then he left them and got in his boat again and went off to the other shore. So that theoretically should be here somewhere. We've heard this before in the other Gospels, haven't we? And what happens in the other Gospels? This is one of those places where Mark does not have the detail of the other two synoptics. In the other Gospels, they say, no sign will be given it to except the sign of Jonah, who spent 3 days in the belly of the whale, so will the Son of Man spend 3 nights in the belly of the earth. And then he says, or no sign will be given, such as Solomon, the queen of the south, came from the furthest corners of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon, but you have someone greater than Solomon here. So that sense of the sign, they come with a sign, but this story is not told in the same detail as it's told in Matthew or Luke. Okay. And then he goes off to the other side. As they'd gone off to the other side, they had forgotten to bring bread, and they had only 1 loaf with them in the boat. So now the disciples are always carrying bread with them. They got 5 loaves, they got 7 loaves, but this time they forget the bread. So, anyway, Jesus enjoins them, watch out, guard against the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod. So, and again, here Mark mentions Herod as opposed to just the leaven of the Pharisees, which is mentioned in the other Gospels. So, and the leaven, of course, is what causes the bread to rise. So, why they're looking out for the leaven? Since you usually want the leaven in the bread, except of course, if it's the bread for the Passover, which is unleavened. When God calls his people to freedom, they have to have unleavened bread in order to be on their journey right away. So the leavening the bread is going to make you stop and wait. So the leaven of the Pharisees is going to make you stop. You're supposed to be straightway on your journey, but you're stopping and waiting for the bread to rise. Whether it's Herod, so the political world, or the Pharisees, the religious world that is more concerned about tradition than it is about the teaching of God. So they concluded among themselves that was because they had no bread. And again, so Jesus is trying to teach them something, and maybe he is using the example, but they're missing the teaching in order to deal with what's really right here. So, and that happens a lot of times in our lives. So when he became aware of this, he said to them, "Why do you conclude that it's because you have no bread?" And now this is where he's going to challenge them again about their understanding. Do you not yet understand or comprehend? Are your hearts hardened? And remember, we got back to that last time too? The difference between hardening your heart and having your heart hardened. So one is a sin, and one is kind of the act of God keeping you from seeing what needs to be seen, or that you're not ready for something. So it's not necessarily a sinful act because it's the past tense, or the participle tense, but rather something that is being done to you because you're not ready for this. So, do you not yet understand or comprehend? Are your hearts hardened? Do you have eyes and not see, ears and not hear? So, of course, we've had the healing of the blind man, we've had the healing of the deaf man, and their eyes were open, their ears were open, but you were there for the whole thing, and your ears and eyes aren't. Do you not remember? So now he's going to rattle off. Do you not remember when I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000? How many wicker baskets full of fragments you picked up? They answered him, 12. When I broke the 7 loaves for the 4,000, how many full baskets of fragments did you pick up? They answered him, 7. He said to them, do you still not understand? So when he talks about having eyes and ears, he's not recounting the miracles he's done. That was me throwing that in. But so when he recounts the miracles, when he talks to them about, okay, look at what you've seen, and don't you understand? What does he recount? Only the 2 miracles where he breaks the bread. So, as I said, this is the miracle. Okay, this is the one that sets him apart. Do you still not understand? So now he comes up, and now there's the blind man, and they're back at Bethsaida. Oops. I was already there. So we're back up over here, which isn't far from Capernaum. Okay? Unless it's this Bethsaida, but that's even closer to Capernaum. So let's put it in the scene. So they're back nearby. That's fine. When they arrived at Bethsaida, they brought to him a blind man and begged him to touch him. So now you have again, you have the miracles, and then you go off in the boat, and now you come back, and there's more miracles to be had. When they arrived at Bethsaida, he took the blind man by the hand and led him outside the village. Same thing that happened to the deaf mute, right? So on either side of the multiplication of loaves, you have, in a sense, the same process of the miracle going on. So it's not the same miracle, because one's healing of a deaf man, one's healing of a blind man, but it's the same process that's going on. He takes him outside to get that done. Putting spittle on his eyes, he laid his hands on him and asked, "Do you see anything?" So again, there's a different way of doing this. There's a touch, there's a process involved. And now Jesus, he didn't ask the deaf man, "Do you hear anything?" Because as soon as he did that, as soon as he put fingers in and touched his tongue with the saliva, the man, everything was open. After he said, "Be open," and everything was open, he could hear and talk. But this one, he puts the saliva on the eyes and then says, "Do you see anything?" And he says, "I see people looking like trees and walking." Then he laid his hands on his eyes a second time, and he saw clearly. His sight was restored, and he could see everything distinctly. Then he sent him home and said, "Do not even go to the village." So now this guy seems to do what Jesus tells him to do. He goes home. The other guy didn't. So this is kind of a miracle that takes 2 steps to complete. And both of these miracles require some physical action. The second one takes 2 steps to complete, but he's going to do it. He's going to do what he's told. So now you've got and we've already had Jewish people not doing what Jesus told them to, but now that he's back in Jewish territory, now the people are doing what he told them to do. Okay, we're near the end of chapter 8, so we're actually we're at the halfway point of the gospel. And so Mark's gospel is designed, everything rises and falls in the middle. So the whole point is to lead up to this moment, and then everything falls from this moment. So everything comes in the fulcrum of the gospel, because as I mentioned, sometimes you have 2 or 3 miracle stories, and one of them is a fulcrum, and they change a little bit here. This is the fulcrum of the gospel. So this is Peter's confession about Jesus. Now Jesus and his disciples set out for the village of Caesarea Philippi. Along the way, he asked his disciples. Now in the other gospels, he's at Caesarea Philippi, but this one's along the way. Along the way, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" What do they reply, of course? The same thing that Herod replied, right? He's John the Baptist. Or maybe Elijah. And I don't need to go back through what those guys mean, right? Because we talked about that last week. So maybe this, or one of the other prophets. And again, with Herod, they had talked about one of the prophets of old, but now here they just say one of the other prophets. Okay, and he asked them then, "But who do you say that I am?" And Peter said to him in reply, and actually the translation in Spanish is wonderful in this, because one of the ways of saying, so and so replied is to take up the word. So Peter leads the conversation. So it says Peter took up the word, which is just a nice way, kind of a different way of saying Peter replied. So now someone's taking the lead. They're going to take up the conversation. So Peter replied, "You are the Messiah." Then he warned them not to tell anyone about him. So what does Messiah mean?
The anointed one.
The anointed one, right. I'm not sure if there's 2 ones or not. The anointed one. So we normally think of Messiah as Savior. But Messiah is the anointed one. Of course, anointed by the Holy Spirit, which means he has the power of God. So, and of course, that's how Jesus starts his ministry. In Luke's Gospel, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. Therefore, he has anointed me and sent me to bring glad tidings to the poor. So, you are the Messiah. So, but of course, when we say the anointed one, much of Jewish theology up to that point is built upon, yes, you're the anointed one because you're going to save us. You're going to reign over us. You're going to. So there is a sense that yes, you're the Savior. Now it's not a Savior from sin. It's someone who's going to reign over us, restore the kingdom, restore the glory of Israel, and so that again, once more, Israel has a direct relation with God, and that representative is the King, is the Messiah, the anointed one of God, because the kings, of course, were anointed. So there's a whole lot of expectation. When Peter says you're the Messiah, it's not simply, oh, you have the Spirit of God in you. There's a whole lot of expectation in that, which is what we normally kind of, the common parlance would say Messiah, Savior type of thing. But Messiah is a very specific term, very technical term that means something else. So when Jesus starts talking about what Messiah means, it's not going to sit well with Peter or the other disciples because it's not what they're expecting. They're expecting a king, they're expecting a Savior, they're expecting the power of God to be manifest. So he wanted them not to tell anyone about him. He began to teach them, and so now this is the first prediction. There's going to be a couple of predictions of the Passion. He began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer greatly and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed. So we've already seen the rejection, or some rejection. There will be greater rejection. But he must suffer greatly and be killed. And then he talks about rising up after 3 days. He spoke this openly. Then Peter took him aside. So again, now you have the two people who had just been taken aside so they could be healed. And now Peter's going to take Jesus aside because he's got to close them up. You know, they were opened up, they were able to see, and Peter wants him to stop seeing and to stop talking. Okay, so he's going to take him aside and began to rebuke him. At this, Jesus turned around, and again, what's happening is so Peter takes Jesus over here, and Peter's trying to talk to him like, this is not the way to go. This is not what we're expecting. This is not what we're after. And so the other disciples are kind of seeing this going on, but they may not be hearing it. But Jesus looks and sees them all and says, okay, I've got to put a stop to this now. So now he's going to, in a sense, talk to everybody and talk more loudly so that way everybody will know what's going on here. So it's not going to be a private rebuke anymore. And so Jesus Christ, he says, get behind me, Satan. You are thinking not as God does, but as human beings do. So we've got Satan, and then we've got demons or unclean spirits. Sorry about that. Demons or the unclean spirits. And then we always have Beelzebub. Or Baal. There should be a apostrophe in there, but most of the time it's written without. What's the difference? What's the difference between all of this? Because we use them interchangeably, but they are distinct, especially in the gospel understanding. Remember, Jesus never cast out Satan from somebody. He may cast out a demon or a whole legion of demons, but right. But he does talk about Satan's house being divided. No guesses?
Seems like each one of them recognized Jesus in a different way.
Well, yes, but each of them have. So Satan, at least theologically, would have been at one point Lucifer, right? The archangel, because only archangels have names. The archangel who turned against God by free will and basically said, "You've been God long enough. It's my turn." And of course, Michael says there is no one but God. So you can't have a turn on the throne. We're not playing. So then he's cast out. He becomes, in a sense, the prince of demons. Beelzebub is also oftentimes, from our point of view, is talked about as Satan or the prince of demons. But Beelzebub is Baal is the generic name for a Canaanite god, and kind of sometimes they use it as a specific name, like we use Yahweh as a Jewish name for God, and not just God, but give him a name. But if they gave him a name, the chief of those gods of the Canaanites was called Beelzebub. So this is someone who denies God. This, of course, is all the unknown, unnamed things. And of course, we talk about demons possessing people, but we also talk about casting out illness, as it possesses, as this illness itself is also a demon. So a demon is kind of a generic thing that, yes, there's a personification, like a bad angel, that can possess or control, but it's also any of the things that afflict us. Beelzebub is something very specific again, and this, of course, goes to idolatry or infidelity, which is to have another god. Okay, so those are three things. So get behind me, Satan. So he's not calling him either of these. He's not calling him a demon, like you've been possessed or need to be cast out, and he's not giving him a name that you're unfaithful, but rather you're thinking the wrong way. You're taking this Messiah thing as something of pride, which of course was Satan's sin. You're taking like we're going to have pride because we're this, and that's not what it's about. So that's one of the reasons we're calling him Satan as opposed to calling him something else. You're not thinking as God does, but as human beings do. And so then he summons the crowd with the disciples. So, and again, he's back into his kind of home territory there. So he summons the crowd with the disciples and said to them, "Whoever wishes to come after me must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and that of the gospel will save it. What profit is there for one to gain the whole world and forfeit his life? What could one give in exchange for his life? Whoever is ashamed of me and of my words in this faithless and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of when he comes in his Father's glory with the holy angels." So basically, what we've got right here is the teaching of the Christian paradox. So, you need to give your life in order to save it. Right? You forfeit your life and you will save it. Otherwise, you must deny yourself in order to find yourself, in order to find your place in the kingdom. So the basic Christian paradox is that sacrifice. And of course, when he talks about the cross, when we hear taking up the cross, we hear suffering, right? But was the cross suffering for Jesus? Yes, he suffered on the cross, but was the purpose of the cross suffering for Jesus? No, it was love. It's his gift of love. And so when we talk about God's love, we always use the sign of the cross. Because that's what it is. So if you want to follow Jesus, you have to love like Jesus, which of course is loving unto death, or loving in a way to give yourself over, which of course is always the Christian paradox. You only get life. I lost all of it, huh? Wow.
You just get it right now.
I did that?
Yeah,
I'm going to have to learn what I'm doing. That's just
You tried
insane.
it.
Yeah, it's the magic hands.
This was like,
They don't just consecrate. They make things disappear too. Okay, let's take that out of the tape. Brother Cardinal hears me talking like that or something. Okay. Okay, so the Son of Man will be, and then the final thing is whoever is ashamed of me and of my words. And he talks about the faithless and sinful generation. So whoever is ashamed of me, the Son of Man will also be ashamed of. Which is interesting. He doesn't talk about the Son of Man welcoming them, because he already knows that if you take up the cross, you'll be welcomed. But it's when you're ashamed, and of course that was what Peter's talking about, because if he dies, that's not going to look good. For the Messiah to die on the cross, for the Messiah to be rejected by the Pharisees, that doesn't look good. We want a Messiah that everybody looks up to and everybody says, here's the Messiah. We want Elijah coming down in the golden chariot and the flaming chariot. We want David re-entering Jerusalem. We want something grand and glorious. Otherwise, it's not going to look good. So if you're ashamed of this, then I'm going to be ashamed of you, because that's not what the Messiah is about. All that makes sense? Okay. So, we're just over an hour. We got one more week to go. We can do chapter 9 next week, right? that gets us into the second half of the gospel, gets us into the good part as we kind of start not a downward trend, but kind of now a new development. So now the disciples finally have figured it out. Now they don't know everything, but their hardness of heart is going to change because now they've declared who Jesus is. So the demons already knew that. They were from the very beginning. They said, "We know who you are. You're the Son of God." And then everybody else seems to know it except the disciples. So now the disciples know it because Peter's taken the turn. And again, the difference in Peter's confession here as opposed to Peter's confession in Matthew. In Matthew, Peter confesses and he's given the keys to the kingdom. And his name is changed. Here, his name's already been changed. Mark mentions his name will be changed almost right away. But in Matthew, he's given the keys to the kingdom at that point, and given, in a sense, you are a rock, and on this rock I will build my church. And that doesn't happen here. So this is simply the moment where he makes the confession, but it's the pivotal moment in the gospel. So because now everything changes at this point. Okay, good. Everything's fine. Questions? Okay. So one more week. We do next week. We'll get chapter 9, maybe even to chapter 10, and then after Easter we'll do the ending of the gospel. Okay, because there's different things happening in Lent, and I can't continue through Lent. There's so many other things going on at that point. Okay, no questions? Have some more.